Some feelings live in silence, until the weight of unspoken words becomes impossible to bear. She begged me, "Don't make me say it out loud," and in that quiet, everything changed. The first time I saw her again after all this time, it was in a quiet corner of the old cafe where we used to meet, the one with tall windows that filtered afternoon light like soft honey. She was sitting alone, the way she always did, with a book open in front of her, but her eyes weren't really on the pages. Instead, they seemed caught somewhere between the past and the present, as if she was weighing something heavy that she couldn't quite put into words. She hadn't changed much, and yet everything about her felt different. There was a quiet confidence in how she held herself now, the kind that comes from years of knowing who you are and what you've survived. But beneath that strength, I could sense something fragile, like a thread stretched thin just beneath the surface. I approached her slowly, unsure if I was even welcome. When she looked up, our eyes met for a brief moment, that sharp intake of breath feeling like a silent conversation all on its own. Her lips curved into a small, hesitant smile, but there was a flicker of hesitation in her gaze, like she was trying to guard herself from something she didn't want to say aloud. We spoke softly, our voices barely above the murmur of other patrons. The words we exchanged were ordinary, about the weather, the cafe's new art, a shared memory here and there. But between every line, there was an unspoken weight, a question hanging in the air neither of us dared to voice. Our hands brushed once or twice, accidental but electric. When she tucked a stray lock of hair behind her ear, I noticed how the afternoon light caught the subtle silver strands, evidence of time's passage. The scent of her perfume was faint but unmistakably familiar, a mix of lavender and something warm that pulled at a memory buried deep inside me. I wanted to reach out, to hold her hand and tell her everything that had been building inside me. But the hesitation held me back. Instead, I settled for sitting beside her, close enough to feel the steady rhythm of her breath, the quiet strength she carried without needing to say a word. In that silence, something passed between us, a quiet understanding that some feelings don't need to be spoken right away. She looked at me again, and this time her eyes held a flicker of something raw and real, something vulnerable she was afraid to let loose. "Don't make me say it out loud," she whispered once, almost to herself. And I understood. There's a kind of weight that comes with the unspoken, the tension between what's felt deeply inside and what is too fragile to voice. That moment, sitting there together, was the beginning of everything that would follow. It was the space where quiet longing met hesitation, and the slow burn of something unexpected began to glow. Days passed since that quiet afternoon in the cafe, but the memory of her lingered like a soft echo in my mind, always just out of reach, teasing me with what wasn't said. When we met again, it was in the soft light of an early evening, under the amber glow of street lamps that made the world feel smaller, more intimate. The air was cool but not cold, just enough to make her pull her coat a little tighter around her slender frame. We walked side by side, the silence between us filled with the noise of distant traffic and our footsteps on the cracked pavement. It was one of those moments where everything feels suspended, as if the world had slowed down just for us to breathe and exist together, carefully tiptoeing around the edges of a truth neither of us dared to speak. Her eyes kept finding mine, and each time it was like a quiet spark, brief but intense, lighting something inside me I hadn't expected. She would hold my gaze just a second too long, and then, like a shutter closing, look away. There was a language in those glances, tentative and trembling, full of unspoken questions and a hunger for connection that scared her as much as it drew her closer. When we stopped to watch a group of children chasing a stray balloon across the park, I felt her hand brush against mine, light, fleeting, but enough to send a shiver up my arm. My heart skipped. It was as if that small touch was a test, a way for her to feel safe, to see if I would step closer or retreat. I didn't move away. Instead, I let my fingers linger near hers, feeling the warmth of her skin even through the fabric of her glove. The smell of rain-damp earth mingled with the faint scent of her perfume, something soft and comforting like home. She spoke little that evening, her voice low and careful, full of pauses and half-finished sentences. The way she hesitated before every word told me more than she could say aloud. I wanted to reach out to tell her that whatever she was holding back, I was here. But the fear of breaking the fragile balance between us made me stay silent, letting the tension build like a quiet storm waiting to break. Her laughter came unexpectedly, a sound so genuine and rare that I caught myself smiling, caught up in the moment. When she brushed a stray curl from her face, her fingertips barely grazing my cheek, it was a touch that spoke louder than any words could. It said, "I'm here. I am afraid. But I want this too." We stood close then, the space between us charged with possibility and restraint. I wanted to bridge that gap, to reach out and touch her hand, to hold her close. Not just because of desire, but because I could see the delicate vulnerability she was trying to hide beneath her composed exterior. Yet, neither of us moved. Instead, we remained suspended in that fragile moment, so near to truth, but not quite ready to cross over. As the evening air cooled further, she pulled her coat tighter, a silent signal that the moment was ending. But in her eyes, I saw a flicker of something new, a quiet hope wrapped in hesitation, that promised this was only the beginning. The quiet of the evening settled around us like a soft blanket, thick with the kind of stillness that invites truth but also demands courage. We found ourselves alone in her living room, the golden light of a single lamp casting long shadows on the walls. The air held a faint scent of vanilla and worn leather, comforting, familiar, but also tinged with something new and fragile, like the first breath of a secret waiting to be spoken. She sat close on the couch, her posture relaxed but guarded, as if waiting for an invisible signal that it was safe to let down the walls she'd carefully built. Her hands rested lightly on her lap, fingers tracing absent patterns on the fabric of her skirt, betraying the tension she was trying so hard to hide. I could hear the steady rhythm of her breathing, soft and measured, but beneath it, there was a tremor, a silent confession in itself. For a moment, she looked at me, eyes searching, as if debating whether to cross an unseen line. I wanted to offer words of comfort, to tell her it was okay to be vulnerable here, that I was not going anywhere. But instead of speaking, I let my gaze hold hers, steady and unblinking, hoping the silence would be enough to say what I couldn't. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. The words hovered between us like fragile butterflies, close enough to touch but too delicate to catch. The hesitation in her voice was not from uncertainty about me, but from the fear of naming something so raw, so real, that it might change everything. Then she reached out. Her fingers brushed lightly against my arm, a whisper of contact that sent warmth spiraling through my skin. The touch was gentle, almost hesitant, but it carried more weight than any declaration. Her hand lingered there for a moment, steady, reassuring, before retreating slowly, as if afraid to stay too long. "I don't want to say it out loud," she finally whispered, her voice trembling with the weight of the unsaid. "Not yet. Not like this." I nodded, understanding more in that single sentence than if she had spoken volumes. It wasn't denial, nor rejection. It was a plea for patience, for time to let the fragile thing between us grow without being crushed by the pressure of words. Her vulnerability unfolded slowly, like a flower blooming in secret. She admitted fears of being judged, of the world misunderstanding what we had, not because it wasn't real, but because it didn't fit the neat boxes others expected. The age between us, the distance we had tried to keep, all of it weighed heavily on her heart. I reached out again, this time letting my hand rest lightly over hers. The warmth of her skin beneath mine felt like a promise that we were both here, willing to try, willing to wait. There was no rush, no need to force the moment, just the quiet acknowledgement that sometimes the deepest truths live in the spaces between words. We sat there, wrapped in a silence that was anything but empty. It was full of longing, hesitation, and a fragile hope that something real was beginning to take root. The rain began softly at first, a gentle drizzle that caught us by surprise as we stepped out of the small cafe where we had lingered for hours, wrapped in quiet conversation. She didn't have an umbrella, and I hesitated for just a moment before pulling mine from the rack. Without a word, I offered it to her, the canvas stretching wide enough to shelter us both from the sudden shower. We walked close beneath it, the small space forcing our bodies near. Her shoulder brushed against mine, and I could feel the warmth radiating from her as the cool drops drummed softly around us. The city blurred into a watercolor of lights and shadows, but all I noticed was the gentle rise and fall of her breath so close to me. At one point, the sidewalk slipped beneath her feet, and instinctively, my hand shot out to steady her. My fingers caught hers, the contact brief but electric, like a spark passing through the quiet tension that had been building between us for weeks. She didn't pull away. Instead, her grip tightened just a fraction, grounding herself in the steady presence I offered. Her eyes met mine, wide and vulnerable, and for a moment, the world faded to just the two of us, the sound of the rain, the gentle pressure of her hand in mine, the shared heartbeat that felt louder than the city around us. I could see the hesitation in her gaze, the silent question hanging between us. Is this real? Is this safe? But there was something else there too, a quiet acceptance that maybe, just maybe, it was time to stop holding back. As we continued to walk, I noticed the softness of her skin beneath my palm, the subtle tremor that spoke of nerves and hope intertwined. The rain washed over us, cold and insistent, but beneath the umbrella, we created a small world of warmth and shelter. When we reached a small park bench, we paused, the rain still falling in a steady rhythm. She didn't move away. Instead, she let herself lean slightly closer, the space between us shrinking until I could feel the delicate brush of her hair against my cheek. "Don't make me say it out loud," she murmured, her voice barely audible over the rain. Her words were a whisper, fragile and laden with meaning, and in that moment, the distance between us dissolved. I didn't need her to say more. Her touch, her eyes, the way she let herself be near me, it all spoke volumes. I slid my hand gently over hers, tracing slow circles on her skin, letting the warmth of my palm be a silent promise. No pressure, no demands, just the quiet assurance that whatever this was, we would face it together. The rain softened, turning to a light mist, and as we sat there beneath the umbrella, the tension that had built for so long began to melt away. There was no need for grand declarations or dramatic confessions. Sometimes, the simplest touch carries the deepest meaning. That night, the unspoken between us was no longer a barrier, but a bridge, a fragile but beautiful beginning. The evening had settled into a gentle calm by the time we found ourselves sitting side by side on the old wooden bench overlooking the river. The sky was painted in fading hues of lavender and soft gold, the last light of day wrapping around us like a warm, silent embrace. The world felt far away here, as if time had slowed just enough for us to breathe in the moment, to hold it close without the need for words. She shifted slightly, her shoulder brushing against mine, a touch so light it might have been imagined if I hadn't felt the warmth ripple through me. The steady rhythm of her breathing was a quiet soundtrack beneath the soft rustling of leaves, and a gentle breeze carried the faint scent of jasmine from nearby gardens. Without looking, I reached out and let my fingers find hers. The contact was tentative at first, a silent question, and when her hand curled around mine, it was an answer. Not a promise made with words, but one made in presence and trust, a quiet vow that we were here, together, in this fragile space between uncertainty and hope. Her head found my shoulder before I realized she had leaned in, resting there with a weight that felt neither heavy nor burdensome. It was a simple gesture, but it spoke of something deeper, the courage to lean on someone else, to share a moment of vulnerability without needing to explain or defend it. The warmth of her hair against my skin was soft, like the brush of a feather, and for a long moment, I just held her hand, feeling the steady pulse beneath her palm. It was a heartbeat that seemed to say, "I'm here. I'm trying. I'm not alone." In that silence, the world around us faded into a gentle blur. No expectations, no demands. Only the quiet presence of two people learning to share space with the complexities of their own fears and desires. We didn't need to speak of what might come next. The unspoken promise hung between us, as delicate and real as the fading light. She shifted again, lifting her head just enough to catch my gaze. Her eyes were softer now, less guarded, carrying a quiet hope that made my chest tighten in the best possible way. There was a vulnerability there that she didn't hide, not because she was reckless, but because she trusted me enough to be seen fully, even with all her fears. I brushed a stray lock of hair from her face, my fingers lingering on the warmth of her cheek. The touch was gentle, reverent, a silent reassurance that I was here, that I saw her, and that none of this needed to be rushed or forced. We stayed like that for a long while, sitting close and letting the night wrap around us like a protective cloak. The slow burn of something real was glowing quietly between us, fragile but alive. In those moments, I understood that love, or whatever this was becoming, didn't need loud declarations. Sometimes it lived in the spaces between words, in the simple act of holding someone close and letting them know, without saying it out loud, that they mattered. The night was quiet around us, the kind of stillness that feels both heavy and full of promise. We found ourselves back at her apartment, the familiar space that now seemed charged with something new, something fragile and precious, like a secret waiting to be carefully unwrapped. She stood by the window, the soft city lights casting a gentle glow on her face. I watched her for a moment, the way the light caught the subtle lines of experience around her eyes, the way her breath came slow and steady, as if she were preparing herself for something difficult yet necessary. When she finally turned to me, there was a hesitation in her step, a pause that held all the weight of the unspoken. Her eyes searched mine, wide and vulnerable, and for a heartbeat, the room seemed to shrink until it was just the two of us, and the quiet tension hanging between us like a fragile thread. Then she spoke, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Don't make me say it out loud." It wasn't a refusal or denial, but a plea, a way to hold onto the delicate balance between fear and hope without tipping too far into either. The words were simple, but they carried everything she couldn't bring herself to say, the truth she was afraid might change everything. I stepped closer, letting my fingers find hers, the warmth of our hands pressed together, speaking louder than any declaration could. Her skin was soft beneath my touch, trembling slightly with the emotion she was holding inside. I smiled gently, the corners of my mouth lifting with quiet understanding. No need for words, no need to rush what was already blossoming between us. Sometimes the deepest love is the one that doesn't shout, the one that whispers in glances, in touches in the spaces between. Her other hand rose slowly, brushing a loose strand of hair from my forehead, her fingers lingering a moment longer than necessary. That simple gesture said everything: trust, hope, the courage to lean into something new without fear. We stood there, wrapped in a silence that felt like the most honest conversation we'd ever had. The world beyond the walls faded away, and all that mattered was the steady beat of our hearts finding rhythm together. In that moment, I realized that love, real, lasting love, doesn't always need to be named. Sometimes it's enough to hold space for each other, to accept the quiet promise in a glance, the tenderness in a touch, and the courage found in the words left unsaid. She smiled then, soft and genuine, her eyes shimmering with tears that weren't sadness but relief. "I don't need to say it," she whispered again, "because I know you feel it too." And I did. Every fiber of me felt it. The slow-burning connection that had grown from hesitations and glances, from touches that spoke louder than words. We stepped forward together, hand in hand, ready to face whatever came next. No grand declarations, no rush, just two souls walking a path shaped by patience, respect, and a quiet, unbreakable bond. That night, "Don't make me say it out loud" wasn't a barrier. It was the beginning of something real, a love that needed no words to be understood.